Hey everyone, it is Ellen from Advocate of Soul, and I just want to say how excited I am to not only have you with me, but to also bring on the guests that I do, people with different stories, different backgrounds, the whole thing. So today I'm interviewing for the second time Lorene. And Lorene, it is a pleasure and honor to have you here. And when we first talked, we talked about your journey, your awakening, the different things that you discovered about yourself. And over the time, I've been watching you just talk more about your health journey and talk more how you've walked through different things that way. And I know in a society where we are just so we just do a lot of sitting and we're not out and about like we used to when we were children. That can create all sorts of different things. And I think it would be really just wonderful to hear your journey and what we can glean from it, what we can gain from it, little tips you have for health in 2025. So, Lorene, it's great to have you here.
Well, thank you so much, Ellen. Yeah, it is great to be here. And we do love health and, all of us have, been excited about it. But I personally thought, well, in order to be a health coach or, even guide people through that, this is going to be a piece of cake. I didn't envision having to go through, excuse me for the word, but hell in order
Yeah.
to happen. And so I think it really humbled me in many, many ways that I never thought, we would go through that dark valley in order to rise above it. But through that journey, it has definitely humbled me. And for that, I'm grateful. So, I have talked a lot about my health and, my journey and my adventures through it. So I'll bear you the whole details. My story is on my website, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But I just want to briefly say that when I was prescribed a wrong prescription, it definitely affected my health in ways that
Mm.
even today, I'm not who I used to be, but that's okay. I'm glad for that because I have become a better person than I ever would have if I wouldn't have gone through that. But at the time when I was going through that, I would never have said that because I'm like,
Mm.
I felt lost. I felt naked in many ways, and there was nobody that really understood me. And so, but fast forward in that adventure, I now look back and say, I would not have chosen any other way. So, for anybody out there that is experiencing a dark valley, it's not the end of the world. In fact, one of the girls I was mentoring just recently, I don't like to use the word coach a lot because, what people have a tendency to do is look to other people for guidance. And I don't want that, because yes, we can be a support, but we are not to engineer would be the word, I guess, another
Mm.
person. So I
Mhm.
like to be very cautious of how I guide others. Yes, we are going to talk about, different good health, eating habits and stuff like that, but never ever follow me exactly in my footsteps
Mhm.
because your
Mhm.
journey is going to be different than mine. And what
Mhm.
I've noticed is we will have a protocol that I did the same thing for years. I had a protocol for diabetes or protocol for cancer and I put everybody in the same box per se
Mm.
per their diagnosis, and that's not fair
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
your body is different than mine and we are
Mm.
not our own bodies, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Sure, sure. So you mentioned, I'm just going to go back just a bit so that people have a little bit of some clarity who might not get to your website and will only see this interview. So what prescription problem was that? What were you doing?
Sure, it was a benzodiazepine, which they are very addictive, very dependent, very crucial when it comes to withdrawal from them. And
Mm.
people aren't told that when they're prescribed that. For example, even today, children are prescribed that for anxiety, for school, distractions, stuff like that. Which I'm not going to say you can't do that, but on the bottle, it will tell you to stay on it for 2 weeks. Does anybody ever stay on it for 2 weeks? No.
No, no.
And so by the time you realize, all that I'm now experiencing is the withdrawal effects from that medication, because I could no longer sleep. I became actually more anxious. And so I kind of wish at that point I would have never been prescribed that. And so when I went back to my primary doctor and I said, hey, I want to get off of this, she
Mm,
looked at me like I had my head chopped off, you know, and I
sure,
realized I'm not going to get help from her.
sure.
So I had pursued functional medications, all that stuff. And thankfully, my functional doctor tried to help me get
Mm,
off of them, but even she was stuck. You know, she had never, in fact, she told me, I've never done this. So together we tried to work at it. But what I have discovered in this journey of healing is going within.
mm-hmm,
And I
mm-hmm.
really want to emphasize that. In fact, if you don't mind, Ellen, I would like to read what I wrote just the other day.
Can I hold you on one question? Because I want to know why you had that prescription. What were you wanting to heal with that prescription? That way people have an understanding.
Sure. So, what had happened is in my awakening experience, you know, I kind of walked away from church and all that fun stuff.
Sure.
And I experienced a lot of anxiety when I was dealing with other people,
Okay.
you know, because there was a lot of kickback that was given to me, and I'm a
Sure.
people pleaser, and so I just became super anxious, weird, you know, than I had
Uh,
ever before. And so I just wanted something to calm me down a little bit. It wasn't that
yes.
bad, but it was, you know, evidently she thought I'm a basket case, and so she gave me an anxiety, I don't even know what it was called, but it was a
Mm,
benzo.
mm,
And she did say, I don't want you to be on here long, I'm going to give you an antidepressant. And I'm like, I'm not depressed.
mm,
I'm just
mm.
a little bit anxious, you know. So the 2 weeks, it went into 3 months. And
Okay.
then it was 6 months. And I'm like, hey, you know, then I felt a dependency. You know, every time my
Sure.
heart rate would palpitate or something like that, I would just pop in a pill and away we'd go. I never ever misused the
Mm-hmm.
the medication, but I was dependent on it. So I, on my own, decided I'm going to quit.
Thank you so
And
much for sharing that. Thank you for saying that it was anxiety based because there's a lot right now of people who are feeling anxious about a whole lot of things. And so they are jumping on things to try to solve that instead of learning how to regulate themselves, which I know we will end up talking about here. But carry on. Thank you.
yeah, because I think, you know, especially when it's something we've never experienced before in my life, because by
Mm,
this time I was several decades old, you know, I was always a calm person. I have 5 children, which now are all grown and married. So there was, you know, I've had everything happen to in our life.
right. You've been a mother. You've been a mother to
Right.
5 children, that alone. So yes, yes.
Could I be nervous, you know? So in my anxiety back then, because I didn't know, and I do talk about that a lot on TikTok, is what to do versus going for medication. Because a lot of us go
Mm,
with, oh, wow, I need to go to a doctor. No, you don't. You know,
hmm
let's
hmm
sit with it for a little bit and see, why did I get anxious? Or what is this, my body trying to tell me? And again, I want to be careful with saying my body, because we are not our bodies.
hmm
We are, you know, we're simply invited to be in a body, but
hmm
we're not the, you know, and so long, for so long, we've all embraced that. And that's why we're quick to go to a doctor thinking because he has a white coat, he's got all the answers. And he puts his pants on the same way I do.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
So it's not in there. And in fact, I knew, you know, people would always say, all the answers are within you. And I'm like, yeah, right. You know, but I never really liked what the doctors did tell me, because nobody knows your body as good as you do,
Would you
right?
say you're an expert of your own body? Is that what you would
Yeah,
say? Yeah,
correct.
yeah.
Nobody ever has been in my body but me, in this body.
hmm
So I have all the answers if I'm quiet long enough. That's why meditation is so huge. And I will tell you, there's a guy, and I'm going to just give credit to him, Logan, I forget his last name, Logan something, Barone, I think. Anyway, he talks about meditation in the value in it, in, you know, sitting with yourself, sitting with others, and just quietly let the truth unfold. And you know, that's what I did when I wrote this, which I'm going to
Yeah,
read.
so yeah, please share now. Thank you.
As I followed a whisper. So I wrote this a couple weeks ago. one that many might dismiss as foolish or overly intuitive. But I knew better. I was met with another wave of physical challenge, but this time I did not reach outward. I turned inward. In other words, I didn't go to any doctor. I silenced the noise, the voices, the well meaning suggestions. I simply entered the stillness and I waited. For 30 days, I held that space for what I knew was already unfolding, not in panic, not in striving, but in quiet trust. I watched as my inner world, my true self, began to bloom again. And in that unfolding, I remembered healing doesn't come from out there, it rises from within, the thick of it all. I chose not to ask for anything outside of me. In fact, I even watched that I didn't worship food. Now, that's going to be a trigger for some people. I wanted to prove the truth I've always known, that within me lives the source, the wisdom, the blueprint for my own wholeness. And now I can say with clarity and joy, it works. And I am well, and I am whole. And life within me is vibrant, joyful, and free. The answer wasn't something I had found, it was something I had. We are our own best medicine, our deepest guide, our truest source. And when we listen, we return home.
So, so in your going within and holding that space for 30 days, what did that look like for you?
Much meditation, much stillness, much, not grabbing social media, not Googling, not going to AI or Chat GPT. It was simply just relaxing into my body and imagining that I am whole because I am not my body. So therefore, what I saw in my mind, so to speak, sometimes I felt like I went out of my body in those times when I was still, and I would vision myself, above me, and I would look down at this body and see it whole. And at that point, I know a lot of people say, oh, it's what you eat or it's what and it's none of that. I even had it laid down the thought of, I have to eat everything that's alive or whole, which I have admiration for that, but I don't worship it. You know what I mean? In other words, that's not going to be my focus. And I was very much a vitamin girl. And, I have nothing against vitamins, but when you make that priority, you're not giving your body permission to be whole. You're depending on that band-aid, so to speak, same as medicines. And I'm not saying I'm against medicine. Some people use it and have great results. I personally did not. So that's just my journey.
Yes, yes, exactly. So, but you spent time in these meditations, and were they guided meditations by your own self, or were they guided meditations by other people?
Definitely myself.
Definitely yourself. And so, what did the inquiry look like?
It was simply just loving myself in a degree that I have never loved myself before. We say we do, but do we really, Ellen? Because there were times, I wanted confirmations from other people. Why? It's because I didn't love myself. When I depend or I like an affirmation, not that there's anything wrong with that, but when that is priority above myself, then we're still stuck in, you know, and as much as we think we don't have habits from all our decades of being in church, I beg a difference. We are.
Oh yeah, no, I'm totally right there with you. I mean, I watch people, having levels of control over how things are going to go, and that's all coming from a church upbringing. It's all coming from trauma that's still there. They just can't let things flow naturally. So yeah, I am understanding. I get it. Um, so so with this line of inquiry, and you went into these places of self-love. Was there like resistance at the onset of doing this, and then it began to get easier over time?
What do you think?
That's up to you. I'm asking you. You're the expert of yourself.
Uh, definitely, like I didn't like the journey to begin with
Oh
because I
yeah.
wrestled so much with myself. And did I ever want to quit? Of course. Did I want
Hmm.
to grab for, I knew the value of ashwagandha, I knew the value of whatever, lots of things out there. And I wanted to reach for them, but yet a part of me would resist because I was like, then I'm back in the same boat again. And, I wanted mainly to prove to myself and then to others because I was inspired by several other authors who healed themselves. And I remember back in the day, Smith's Wigglesworth, and
Oh my
how
gosh.
raise the dead. And I was like, Lorene, why don't you become a picture of perfect health without saying, oh, I tried this or I, took that and that was my answer. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but if we're going to do that, Ellen, we're going to constantly, all our lives do that. And something within me tells me now that should I ever be challenged with health again, I know my answer is within me.
Mhm.
And
Do you
I'm going to try.
believe that, do you think these things on the outside, like ashwanda you're talking about, or different things, if people are taking those, because that can be very much naturally given here, it can be totally from the planet, it's totally source right there in the planet. So my question to you is it the taking of those substances that you feel lead you to a dependence on that, or can people take like an ashwanda, let's say, or whatever they're using, and it be leading them to them?
Oh, of course, because again, every one of us is different. And whatever you want to do to implement that healing for yourself is totally your freedom. So
Mm.
if it takes the ashwagandha for you and you feel peace about it, go for
Yeah, I've never tried it, so I don't know.
it.
But I've
Yeah,
heard from different people that it's actually led them to an inner inquiry. It's led them to not depending on that outer, but it has led them to inquire within, like you're talking about.
absolutely. And even especially even mushrooms or cannabis,
Mhm.
those are, avenues that I've heard people say they had a deep revelation.
Mhm.
So I, I'm here not to judge. And
Mhm.
that's the biggest thing I took away from this journey is stop deciding what other people should do. For example, a lot of MLM companies out there will tell you, I have the answer for everything and with their vitamin. And I'm not saying that they don't, but don't put that on me because that might not be my experience. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm. I
Like,
do. I do. Yeah. Yeah.
so
No, I do. And I think, how we react or respond to somebody who's going, hey, MLM and the pharmaceutical company is really within our own selves, right? It's our own battle within us. So if I'm offended at somebody or feeling like they're putting something on me, then maybe that's more my issue than it is what they're actually doing. But I mean, the pharmaceutical community, we've talked about it before. We see it all online. Man, the billions upon billions of dollars that pharmaceuticals are reining in. And really, if people did just sit with themselves, they might find that maybe that's not what I want to do. Maybe I don't need to be taking that. That's what happened to me. I was an antidepressant back in the day, a long time ago. And I just knew suddenly I need to go off this. And when I went within myself, it showed me how to do it. So I wouldn't have any withdrawal symptoms. And I remember I had a friend who's like, you're not having any symptoms. I said, yeah, I kind of listened to myself, how I was to do it, how I was to get off it. And so, yeah, it's very interesting. Health journeys are very, very interesting. So coupled with your going within and these inquiries, how do you eat differently? Do you have a nutritional way that you do things? What's that look like for you?
well, it can, and I'm not saying that I am careful and aware of that, but I don't make it so like it has to be this way. In
Mhm.
fact, for me, for my personal journey was I like to take Saturdays and just prep food for the week so that I have it, it's very convenient for me to pursue that. But I would never put that on you or anybody. Say, oh, Ellen, you have got to prep all your foods, the certain day, certain time, even certain foods, because here again, I'm putting a protocol on you that's not required. So even, my clients that I'm working with right now, a lot of them are Amish, and I enjoy them, but they are saying, wow, you're coaching us different or you're mentoring us different. And it's because when they get on the phone, most of them are we're doing on a phone call, is because I step back and I very much look at that person in my soul and I imagine them being, I am them because we are one. So what would I do in that situation? But in versus me telling them, you need to do this and this, I ask them to express themselves. What would they like to do? How would they like this to look? And, if it includes a good, healthy eating regimen, we'll implement that. But I'm not forcing it.
Yes. So what's your eating regimen look like? You personally?
Personally, I like lots of vegetables, but I'm just like everybody else. Every once in a while, I want a pancake. Who said I can't have a pancake? So I will eat one and I'll be okay with that. But I don't make it an everyday, regimen. So the more alive the foods are, the better I feel about them. And, like, I just read a little TikTok this morning or listened to one this morning and it kind of made me laugh is when the cornflakes were first introduced in 1902, before there was no cornflakes. So we think today that's a good breakfast, and it's the worst breakfast ever. But we got into the habit of it. What do we put on top of it that we feel so good about? Is a banana, and those are not. There's not. That's just not the best breakfast for us. Why don't we reach for an avocado or some type of a healthy fat? And introduce our day into something like that. So the word breakfast, actually, if you break it up, it means break a fast. So you don't have to eat first thing in the morning. But for years we did that. So it's fun to just adventure into what 2025 brings for us. In fact, I knew we were going to do this call this morning. And so in my meditation, as I was walking, I was like, what are we going to talk about today? Because so many times when we get on calls like this is now I'm going to get the answer. And I don't want to do it that way because it's not in so much in I have the solution for you as inviting you to what bubbles up within you, what excites you, what brings a thrill into my health regimen for myself, for yourself, for everybody else that's listening. So after I came back, I wrote this journal and it said, the body is not separate from God. It is God in form, woven from starlight, soil, and divine code. And I just want you to focus on that. Everybody that's listening in is look at your own divine code that is now written on your heart. You are not here to escape your body through enlightenment. You are here to awaken through it. Every cell is sacred. Every organ a symphony of intelligence. The temple was never a metaphor. It's your bones, your breath, your blood charged by light and earth. And when you ignore the temple, you short circuit the message. And that's key right there because I think so often we short circuit by hurrying up and running to either a doctor or a medicine lady or whatever. And you're your own health, your own medicine. So when you honor it, you become the message. Spirituality that disconnects you from your body is just another illusion. Enlightenment is not somewhere else. It's in the stillness of your feet on the dirt, the warmth of the sun on your skin. The moment you breathe returns to rhythm and says, I am home. So, wow, I just now noticed I wrote that twice.
So I see where you're going and I'm listening to you and I'm understanding you, but I'm also asking you about your journey, your personal journey and what it looks like. What type of foods do you eat? All of these things. Like what are these things that have helped transform your life? And that's what I'm wanting to hone in. I'm wanting to hone in that direction because that's not about you telling people at all. It's just saying, here was my journey. We get so afraid sometimes, I think, of talking about our journeys. Like, this was my journey. This was what I did. And there we are. And that's it. And we just leave it at that. And so I'm curious the foods and the different things that you eat, because I have a lot of people who come from eating disorders, and that's very, very different. And I came from an eating disorder myself, and that required a whole different type of journey around nutrition. So I'm just wondering what you did within yourself with nutrition. What's that look like for you? Yes, you talk about how, we shouldn't eat cornflakes and different things. And well, cornflakes are Wheaties. We can do anything with that. Rice Chex. My God, we could Captain Crunch. All those things, all those little cereals. But so why choose the avocado? What's the importance of an avocado? 'Cause I love avocados, just so you know, I love them.
Well, good. Because some people are allergic to them, and I'm like,
Hmm.
really, are you? I'm not going to judge on that part, but I know I did my homework and looked at what are healthy fats because I knew we needed healthy
Mm,
fats. I
mm.
just knew that. So I, pursued on just figuring out what's healthy for me in that side, like coconut oil versus um, corn oil or something like that. And even grapeseed oil,
Oh,
actual
yes.
oil is good for you. And, just I didn't do overnight change. Ellen,
Sure.
like a lot of people empty their pantries. I didn't. I, started to substitute. What could I do versus that? Because I knew, for some reason, I didn't feel good after I had any kind of wheat in my body. But
Mm,
that was, again, it's me. So I avoided that with as much ambition as I could, like a cauliflower crust pizza versus a regular flour crust pizza. And, I did gradually. And I looked at the keto diet, not that I, think it should be a certain diet, but some of those things were highlighted in my
mm,
mind. And
mhm.
so I would pursue that. We can never do without sugar 100%, but we can do healthy sugars. And so I would change that, and sometimes I would do maple syrup versus sugar, things like that.
Yes.
And, I can say today my diet isn't perfect. I don't like when people just hone in on that with, like go to a restaurant and order all kinds of special foods. I don't, I'm not saying you can't, but just don't make it so complicated for the
Hmm.
waitress. What I will do instead is I will imagine what I'm eating is healthy for me. I try to avoid the pastas and all that, but do I eat them once in a while? Of course. I think we all
Hmm.
do. Let's not
Hmm.
try to skip around and pretend we're that perfect, uh, you know, um, picture of eating habits when we're not.
Mm.
But the more of the healthy, like broccoli, I will say this: the darker your fruits and vegetables are, the better they are for you. And I think we've known
I've
that for
heard
you.
that. Yeah, I've heard that.
So I will always, when I go shopping, I try to stay in the front of the store because to me, I remember a guy years ago said, when you go past the vegetables, you're in dead country, and I'm
Yeah.
like, hi. So I tried my best to stay just in the front of the grocery store. But I will, before that, even, I love farm markets and I love that they're open right
Mhm.
now,
Mhm.
again. So I will get all my produce from them. And that way I know that they're organic and healthy. And you have to be careful at the grocery store. It might say organic and they're not, so when you know where you're buying it from your neighbors, then you're in control of that. Of course, the best thing is to have your own garden, but do I? No.
No. Okay. I'm right there with you. I'm being back in the States right now, and in Florida, it's really hot. Well, it's also, going on in the UK too, just very not as hot. But all the gardens are coming out, all the farm markets are coming out, and everybody's selling different things. And I mean, it's good quality stuff. You know what I mean? You know where it's coming from, you know the soil, you know the ground, you know what they're doing, and it's people who are managing farms that are not being sprayed with all the crap on it, and are doing all this stuff. So yeah, it's really, really good. So what do you say to people who do a lot with fruit? Because it seems to be there's some revival happening, or something. That's the only word I can use, related to fruit. And it's my understanding that some fruit has certain sugar contents in it that isn't necessarily as good for you as it looks.
Yeah. And and I've heard the same thing as you, Ellen. There's times, and I just shake my head. I'm like, okay, is that really going to work out? And I'm just going to sit back and watch right now because I do know my own experience that I've had with just fruit, and I can't do it. It's way
I
too much
can't
sugar.
either.
It's way too much sugar in some of them. But I'm not saying that they can't, another person that does that. But I'm curious how, in the long run, let's say 10 plus years from now, a decade or so, how are they going to feel about that? I'm not
Mm,
sure. Or then you have people that are eating all meat, they're, into carnivore. And it works for some people and then it doesn't work for the other person. And that's why I said at the beginning, what works for you might not work for another person. But am I
exactly.
going to judge you because you are a carnivore? No. If that works for you, kudos. Because I have a nephew right now. He's doing fabulous with that. But
Mhm.
when I would eat that much meat like he is eating, I would pay for it. I
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
I know my body.
Yeah, and there's the whole thing about vegan and, everybody, just eating straight vegetables and things. I've tried different things over the years, tried these like absolute, I'm going to do all in this way. And I find for me, it's just me, just like you have your own, I have my own. I kind of like a combination of different things. I just do. I feel like my body feels better that way when it's not denied certain things and like crushed in. And you can feel your body going, I want this. I really would like to have beets, for example. So like I'll see like beet juice that keeps coming in my head, but no, I'm not going to go for the beet juice because I'm going to stay over here with orange juice or whatever it may be, as weird as it all sounds. And I have found that, gosh, if I just listen to the freaking beet juice that's going off in my head or those colors, sometimes you see colors of things that are actually leading you to a different vegetable. And your whole body knows that. It knows exactly what you need in that moment, that will help you.
Exactly. And I would say be open to muscle testing yourself at this time. Let's
Mm.
say there's someone listening to us on this call and they're saying, well, how do you know? Because there is something about being intuitive. But I will tell you at first, I wasn't really intuitive enough to really comprehend. And so there's different kinds of muscle testing, like lift the strength of your arm, or even, you know, put, asking yourself and allowing that muscle test to guide you a little bit, so that you feel more comfortable, because you might have that debate going on in front of you. You've got beet juice in front of you and orange juice, which is better for me right now. And gosh, you might not know. So I did muscle test myself at the beginning. And another thing I wanted to say is when somebody or anybody on the call happens to be on a benzo of any kind or any kind of medication that is disturbing you, um, what you don't want to do is go on a social media group that is reveling in their misery. Because I did that at first. When I was on withdrawal, I was like, well, I want somebody to sympathize with me.
Oh, absolutely. I understand.
So I joined those groups, and it was very disheartening, very disturbing, because everybody was in such a sad situation, like we'll never get out of this. And anytime, whatever you feel when you're in that withdrawal, what I would invite people now to do is welcome that feeling, instead of, you might have akathisia, a very big, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that word correctly, but, your tremors or whatever, instead of resisting them, welcome them, look at them and say, what are you trying to tell me? Because your body is never against you. So when you're going through that, like you said, you went on your own, you listened to your own body, which is the key to it. And nobody ever talks about that. What they want you to do is sympathize with me, cry with me, hold my hand. Well, at the end of the day, is that going to make you feel better? Probably not so much. But if
Mhm.
you allow and welcome, like I used to get super anxious, like overly anxious, and what I now know is I want to invite myself. Why am I anxious? What is it? What is my body trying to tell me? And listen to that voice. And you will be, like you said, within weeks, be out of it versus I'm stuck. It's getting
Right.
worse.
It's a difference between staying in victim consciousness and
Correct.
like overcoming, because we can remain the victim. There's nothing wrong with like going, oh, I'm really sorry that you're going through that. Hey, that's really sad. And sitting with the person in that, there's no problem with that. But then there does come that transition because I've experienced that where either I was the victim constantly complaining and or I was the one that was sitting with the victims and helping that continue. And it doesn't produce anything. It doesn't give an answer. It doesn't allow for that person to move forward. It just keeps them going. Well, I'm just going to keep stepping backwards, stepping backwards, stepping backwards. And so, yeah, this is a good conversation. I'm appreciating this. So, in the mix of the nutrition that you have and the going within, do you do any physical exercise? Because we're such a society right now where we're in front of computers all the time and we're sitting and we're sitting. Do you have things that you do to get your body up and moving? Because that's a good thing too.
It is. And what better way than walking? I love to walk barefoot in grass. And I
Mm.
don't get it done every morning, because we're up and let's go to work and all that fun stuff. But I make it a habit to sometime during the day either walk barefoot on the grass, whatever time that is. It doesn't have to be first thing in the morning. And then I have a vibration machine that I like to vibrate just simply to activate all my cells because I don't necessarily run. I'm not against running. I think it's a great thing, but I'm a grandma.
Yeah, I'm really not into it myself. So it's okay.
So I feel when I do that for 10 to 20 minutes, I get that running atmosphere, in my cellular level. And that's something I personally have enjoyed doing. And I think red light therapy is good if anybody has achy bones, things like that are out there for us. Years ago, we used to have zappers. You remember those, those metal things you held in your hand, wrapped in.
Oh, yes, yes. Oh
Well,
my God.
let's fast forward now. Today, we have got red light therapy or, it's things like that that I think have upgraded themselves and they're here for us for such a time as this. So
So what's this vibrating machine you're talking about? How does that work?
it's one that you stand on and then it's got a handle. I forget what they're called. I should know. Um, Gee, I don't know what they're called.
It's all right. It's okay.
Yeah, the vibrating platform, I think is what it's called. Anyway, so you stand on it barefoot and it literally vibrates your whole entire body. And that you start out with 10 minutes and you can go up to 20 minutes on that. Oh, I also like saunas. I have a personal one that I, absolutely adore. I try to do it once a week just
Hmm.
because I don't, and especially in the winter times, we don't heat our bodies like we do in the summer when we work outside
Hmm.
in restaurants. So I have a respect for them as well.
So you get out, you walk, you do earthing, you connect with the magnets, the magnetic stream of the earth. And so the vibrating machine, it just vibrates your entire body. That's what it does.
Mhm.
And so that puts you in a state as though you've been running. Is that what you're saying? So is your
And
heart rate going up too? Like, is everything, like when you run, your heart rate goes up?
it does, but yeah, I don't think the heart rate goes up so much as your whole body moves and shakes
Oh, I
because,
see. I see.
so it activates the cells, more of your cells that way.
Sure, sure. Okay, so don't you, I'm enjoying this whole conversation. I'm loving this. So, have you ever done any type of like, do you incorporate creativity into your daily routines as well, a form of creativity? Because that's also good, for health.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that can be, whatever a person prefers, whether it's art, singing, music, dancing, whatever. I personally love to paint, but that's just something, that I like to do. But yeah, I totally agree with you. You know, find a passion, find, what gift you have within you and run after it,
Hmm.
whatever that looks like. So.
Hmm. Exactly. And so, do you at all couple all of these things that we've talked about with any good books to read? One of the best books I ever read was called The Body Keeps the Score. That was just so, gosh, what a revolutionary book that was for me. But do you have any reading materials, things that you read or listen to as well that just continue to expand your journey?
I do. And I think we all do. Hopefully all of us have more than one book that we have dived into. And, Ellen, there's times I have gotten a book and I could not read it. It wasn't the right time. But then later on, I'll pick it up and it's perfect for me. I have great respect for books from Brad Nelson, The Emotional Code, because I do think that a lot of our health can be involved with emotions. So it's crucial to look at that, um, and allow yourself to discover. Have I ever had like an astrology reading done? Yes. Don't be afraid of those things because
Mhm.
it's unique on how you will find out things that you have subconsciously held on to, and they can affect your health. Absolutely. But do I believe in generational, diseases? Not so much. I think they can be there, but just because my two sisters had cancer does not mean that I will have cancer. I can
Yeah.
choose to have it if I wanted, because we
Yes.
are what we focus on. Absolutely.
Yes.
And, if you don't like the sickness that's in your body right now, look at what you're thinking, and that will tell you.
Yes.
So there's an element of that. So I just wanted to share this story, something that I had, and I asked the people if I can share this, and they didn't mind. One of my people that I was working with called me one morning, and they were like, "Hey, our daughter needs help. She's not feeling well, and she's crying, and she's not herself." So I drove to their place. I was going to be in their area that day anyway. So I said, I'll be just a half hour earlier and I'll, stop in. And I looked at the girl and her eyes were absolutely black, pitch black, dark black, ugly black. Back in the day, we would have probably said she, has a devil or something like that. But I knew she didn't. But I imagined myself as I was looking in her eyes, I was her. And I just smiled at her and immediately said, "Oh, I gotta go potty." She ran to the bathroom, came back and very quickly, happy as a lark, and laughing and singing and dancing. And I looked at her eyes and they were sky blue. So the reason I'm sharing that is to tell you that even sometimes your energy of enlightenment through your looks can heal another person.
I
Because
agree.
I did nothing. I didn't even touch her, nothing. I was like, you know, to feel like we have to go through certain motions or certain agendas is not the way that it's going to work. It's more of our awareness, I guess, our conscious, seeing ourselves that we are, you know, enlightened beings.
Mhm. Mhm. And we're conduits of something.
Correct. Yes.
Yes.
And also to remind people, you have got that ability to assist other people in ways you can't even imagine. Just follow your intuition in times like that.
Mhm. That's
So
really
I'm
good,
not sure
Lorraine.
why, felt it. I
I'm
remember
glad you
that
shared
story.
it. No, I'm really glad that you did. So one thing I remember from the last interview we had, and I thought it was so revolutionary, and I just wanted you to kind of reflect on that with me, today, not necessarily with me, but with an audience, but was when you said if people feel like they have cancer in their body, like for example, breast cancer, I thought this was so fascinating what you said, is that we immediately, we immediately go and get it like you get radiation, whatever chemotherapy, do all these things. You go and have people like, the monthly breast exams and all these things. And you said it was so fascinating. You said, just leave it alone and it'll work itself out of your body. It's when we do all those things that we just keep adding to it. Can you talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, well, what you said is, what I know, and that is everything that is happening in our bodies is an invitation to advance our healing. So instead of always getting freaked out and scared, and we have, for some reason, we have the word die related to cancer,
Mhm.
and that's been done for generations. when every one of us has cancer cells in our bodies. And if we allow them to manifest in order for them to heal themselves, it will truly happen. We need to leave our bodies good enough alone. It's, in fact, even in um, heart disease, and a lot of people don't know, when a person has a stroke, the best thing you can do is give them red pepper and allow that to dissolve in our bodies, and that will awaken us. But what do we do? Everything but that. So the same thing happens in, cancer cells are there to purify your body. And instead, we look at it as a curse. So,
So
that's something.
how do they purify your body? This is fascinating. I always like this with you. How do they purify it?
You mean the cancer cells?
Yeah.
Because what they're doing is they're getting rid of the negative cells, because the good cells will actually kill the dead cells, or the cells that are not positive,
Hmm.
not healthy for us. They
Hmm.
will make them healthy if we give them the chance. Instead of, what we often do, and I used to do that, is I would get mad at myself. Well, a time like that, you want to be thankful. You want to be grateful. Thank you for these cells. They're obviously here for a reason. And so take good care of my body. Thank yourself for taking good care of your body versus I'm, I didn't ask for this. I didn't want this. Yeah, you signed up for everything you did in your life and are doing. So
So do they gather is that what they do? They gather whatever is wrong. And so let's say it becomes like a lump or something, or it's basically they're gathering all of the bad cells. Is that what you're saying? Into one
right.
spot
Hmm.
and then and keeps them from dispersing, right?
Correct. If we leave them alone.
If we leave them alone, and then eventually it just dissolves on its own.
Right. And I would say if something is, abstracting you outside, do something as simple as what's that oil called? Oh, I can't think of that oil. Not olive oil, but
It's like an essential oil of sorts.
yeah, something like that. It's not, shoot. Dan, can you think of that oil that we have at home? My husband's here, so I
That's
was like,
great.
oh, why it went blank on me. But people wrap it around their waist already. People have had, that type of cancer, where it was outside, or even a burn. They've had hefty burns. And if you will take a compress and add that,
Is it like aloe vera?
no.
Because you use it for burns, aloe vera. I don't know.
No, my sister-in-law Margaret had used it for many things, and she was so impressed with it. And so, like, for example, I had a cold in my eye that didn't go away for a long time. And
Yeah.
I was invited to do, in my own self, I felt the invitation was to make a compress with that. Um,
Oh, wow, interesting.
I'm going to
Interesting. I
be,
wish I knew it. I don't know either.
yeah,
It's
I'll
all
think of it.
right.
As soon as I get off the phone, I was like, oh, why did I not think of it? But maybe I'm not supposed to think of it right now, because then
Sure.
people, focus on that.
Sure.
But follow your heart, whatever is in your heart and in your soul. And, am I going to sit here and say, 1 cup of broccoli? No, because,
No.
much broccoli you want, enjoy it. It's good for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Lorene, this was just I do enjoy talking with you, and I just appreciate the energy that you shared through and shared across. And I know that people are going to gain the understanding and the need to look within themselves, to see themselves as a guide. Because we are the experts. You are the expert of your own body. I can't tell you what you should do for your body. And I just really want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for just coming and being candid and open and just kind of honest with it, but always pointing us back to the breath of our absolute essence, because that's what you're doing. You're pointing us back to us, to our breath. And I want to say thank you.
And laugh a little bit more, right?
Absolutely. Oh my God. Laughter. Yeah, laughter's incredible
It
how it
is.
can lift.
Yeah. Many people sometimes, in the past, especially, we've heard them, have a diagnosis. And just by the way, We are not our diagnose.
Thank
You
you.
know
Thank you for
what,
saying that.
yeah. So anyway, they've told them, you've got so much time to live. And those people would go up in the mountain and laugh, watch movies that made them laugh, and they got well. So there's something
Yes.
about that, Ellen, that, for me, I need to lighten up and be a child again, because we take life extremely serious. And just to know that we are in control of our own outcomes.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else you
Well,
want
thank
to
you.
add? Where can people find you if, they want to
I'm on
connect to your story online? Because you said your story's there.
It is. I have my story all written out on my website, which is empoweredhealthnow.org. I'll say that again, empoweredhealthnow.org. I had to do that because somebody else already had empowered health.
Oh,
so,
well, it's okay.
so I added the word now because, we want it now, right? We don't want to wait
Yes.
2 years for this.
Well, we live
And
in the now, right?
correct.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we live in
there
the
is
present
only now.
moment.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you for having me. I always love talking to you, Ellen.
You're
You're
just a lot of fun.
Well, you're a spark of inspiration as well.
Thank you so much. All right, everybody, you heard this little message that we did here, and it's empoweredhealthnow.org that you want to look at. I'll put it up in the meeting notes and all of that in the description. This will be coming out on YouTube tomorrow. It'll be premiering. And thank you. Thank you again, Lorene, for being here.
You're welcome. We'll talk